The NoFap movement has been gaining huge popularity online and in self-help culture over the past couple of years, with dozens if not hundreds of creators taking to their platforms to proclaim the benefits of NoFap and to recommend it to others. In this video, I want to address this issue from a Taoist perspective. The aim of this video will not be to argue for or against the morality of NoFap, but rather to see what we can learn from the Tao Te Ching that might help us to form an opinion around this topic, and also to investigate it from a logical perspective. Now, I want to clarify that the goal of this video is not to promote celibacy. Sex is a natural and normal part of life. The way it is represented in porn, however, is not natural or normal, although it can seem that way because of how pervasive it is. The truth is, sexual acts and partners are portrayed in pornography with one goal in mind: to make you watch more. Remember that pornography is a business. This means that every detail you experience while consuming it will be geared towards invoking as much eroticism as possible, not towards representing sexuality in a realistic way. Translation? Porn is not real. It's just porn. A steady diet of pornography will leave you with expectations about sexuality that no human being could ever meet. I have known people whose real relationships have been completely ruined by addiction to pornography. The reason? The real person just couldn't compete. Taoism is heavily concerned with embracing what is, and with letting go of obsessive desires for things that either don't exist or are not attainable. There is no greater curse than discontent, no greater misfortune than wanting something for oneself. Therefore, he who knows enough is enough will always have enough. I think we've all experienced at one time or another how much of a curse discontent really can be. Excess of any pleasurable thing always leads to problems. Pleasures are most pleasurable in their natural, moderate forms. Food is more pleasurable when you don't overeat. Sleep is more pleasurable when you don't oversleep. Sex is the same way. I actually did a 2-part video series on why this is the case on a scientific level, and I think it actually turned out pretty good. So if you want to see more about that, I would really recommend watching these 2 videos that I'll link here. The long and short of this, though, is that porn trains our brain to be content with nothing less than a sexual experience that only occurs in pornography. With this as our baseline, most real sexual experiences lose their ability to compete. Porn also teaches us to view our sexual partners not as people, but as objects to satisfy our own desires. Healthy sex between 2 people in a close partnership brings them closer together and strengthens their relationship. The sort of sex advertised in pornography does not do this. This type of sex is inherently self-centered, with a focus on performance and one's own personal satisfaction, rather than on the type of sex that is conducive to real love. Pornography is not a good training ground for learning how to strengthen a real, lasting relationship. Quality relationships take practice, work, and a willingness to help meet someone else's needs. This kind of relationship promoting behavior is mutually exclusive with a sort of self-pleasing attitude gained through watching porn. Next, I want to address this pervasive belief going around that complete sexual abstinence is impossible. I've heard people make the argument for porn or self-pleasure by maintaining that it's necessary in order to prevent a person from engaging in sexual encounters that they normally wouldn't engage in, simply out of an overabundance of sexual appetite. Some people argue that if you don't fap, you'll be more likely to seek out sexual experiences that you normally wouldn't, just because you're undersexed. The basic assumption here is that a person requires a certain amount of sexual stimulation, and that if they don't get it through either desirable sexual encounters or by self-pleasure, they will be more likely to seek it through poor sexual encounters, such as encounters with people they don't really like, or encounters that are not desirable to both parties. Once again, the basic assumption at work here is that it is not possible to abstain from sex completely, but this is not true. We often tend to classify sex by grouping it in with our basic bodily survival needs, such as food and sleep. This is not correct. If you go without food for an extended period of time, you will die. If you go without sleep for an extended period of time, you will die. Your body requires sleep and nutrients in order to continue functioning as a living organism. It does not require sexual stimulation in order to accomplish this. We logically know that this is true. When we make the claim either consciously or subconsciously that complete sexual abstinence is impossible, what we really mean is that it is extremely difficult. Impossible and difficult are not the same thing. It is impossible to gain 15 pounds of muscle mass after one workout. It is not impossible to learn the self-discipline required to adopt a daily workout routine that can eventually lead to the gain of 15 pounds of muscle. It is impossible to lose 50 pounds after one day of dieting. It is difficult to stick to a diet long enough to lose 50 pounds, but it is not impossible. We accept that dieting and exercise can lead to extraordinary long-term results, even though they are difficult. Sexual abstinence is not different. I recognize that sexual abstinence will be more difficult for some people than for others, especially depending on the sexual history of the person in question, or if they have had years of regular pornography use, for example. For someone in this situation, complete sexual abstinence may be difficult, but it's not impossible any more than it's impossible for a person that has become out of shape to lose weight through dieting. I'm not making an argument for the morality of NoFap, you can decide that for yourself, but I'm absolutely making an argument for the fact that it is possible. And once again, I'm not arguing for celibacy here either. I'm using abstinence as an example to show that it's possible. And if abstinence is possible, NoFap certainly is as well. I'm not trying to convince anyone who does not desire to stop fapping to attempt to do so, but I would hate for a person who wants to stop to come under the impression that it's not possible, because this just isn't true. Science does not agree with this claim, logic does not agree with this claim, real life experience does not agree with this claim, so we can just do away with this idea once and for all. Now, the next point I think is worth addressing is the argument where somebody tries to invoke the principles of Taoism to defend a habit of pornography or self-pleasure. Now, once again, if you don't have a desire not to fap, I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'm just here to explore this issue from a Taoist perspective and to relate these principles as clearly as possible. I've heard people make the argument that to deny an impulse to fap goes against nature, and that this puts you out of the flow because it counts as unnecessary striving. This, however, is a misunderstanding of the basic principles of Taoism. Wu Wei is often confused with inaction or absence of effort, but this is not true. Wu Wei means doing by the act of non-doing, or effortless action. This means that when you set about to do something, you seek to do it in the most natural and effortless way, and that you rely on your intuition to assist you in doing so. Consider a person that gives into every impulse or craving that he or she experiences. This person is not in Wu Wei. Far from learning to let go of desires, this person is completely dominated by them. Now, it goes without saying that one of the biggest issues with pornography is its inherently addictive nature. And I'm serious, if you haven't watched my videos on dopamine and how pleasure works, stop the video and go watch them. You'll be glad you did. Addiction is the epitome of a desire that has gotten out of hand. When something outside of ourselves gains that level of control over us, we become almost completely unable to follow the pushes and pulls of the universe. Whereas Taoism tells us to listen to our intuition, addiction strangles intuition. A craving or an urge is not the same as intuition. Cravings and urges are desires. How could a person ever get into the flow of life when they're constantly being pulled in the direction of a desire that is taking over their life? I'm not saying this to condemn anybody. I'm only showing that you cannot twist the principles of Taoism to justify a pursuit of cravings. If you fap and you want to fap, that's for you to decide. But if you have a desire not to fap, the principles of Taoism can aid you in learning not to do this. To be honest, I don't really think that Taoism is a substitute for professional help when you're dealing with something like an addiction, but rather something that can be used in tandem with it. If you do want to stop fapping, there are resources out there to help you to do this. As I've said before, I am no kind of professional anything, so I think it goes a bit out of my realm to try and give specific advice on this matter. But speaking as an average Dave, I know multiple people who have overcome addiction to fapping, and I know it is possible. I don't think NoFap turns you into some kind of demigod, but it certainly does give you a vastly increased amount of control over your own life and happiness. I know this topic is going to be pretty controversial, so feel free to discuss it in the comments. Just make sure and be nice to each other, alright? So with that said, thanks for watching. Peace and blessings.